Hello again, everyone. I hope you had some really good discussions in the breakout groups. And also that you are not shy to share your good practice, because that is also really important, not just discussing the input from the key speakers, but also sharing the value of your work or your experiences and your good projects. Okay, we are doing this online seminar for the first time, and we also realize that there are some points in the program that really looks so easy to do in theory, but in practice it's not so easy. And now we are going to share some things from the breakout groups, and that we will do from one of today's really big heroes, Sergio. We'd really have been sweating and trying to break you out into groups, and so that you are going to be satisfied with you also with your group. So Sergio, this applause goes to you.
Thank you so much, Tuna. And yes, it's not an easy job, but it's very rewarding, and it's amazing to see so many people and enthusiastic. So anyway, it's a pleasure to do this work. Now the facilitators, they were trying to take some notes while they were in the breakout rooms with you, also to facilitate the process now about sharing with everybody, because around 80 participants, so it will not be easy to just give the word to everybody to just share a little bit. So the facilitators will do that work for you a little bit. After the sharing, we're going to have the final words from Tuna just to close. And after that, 3 o'clock Central European time, we're going to have an informal time, meaning that we're going to let the Zoom on. So then between around half an hour, you'll be able to just talk with each other, chit chat. It's like having a coffee with a friend, but just in an open Zoom. And then at 3:30 Central European time, we're going to close it. So also, if you want, stay longer and enjoy that moment. For now, the facilitators will present, and we're going to start with Olga.
Hey, everyone. Hope you can hear me well. My desk is full of post-its and all the notes because I felt very inspired into breakout rooms I had. I have 4 highlights, 2 from the first breakout and then 2 from the second. When it comes to the support structures and the room we had after Steven's group, the group really appreciated this approach towards well-being rather than mental health. The holistic approach in that to include as well the social factors when it comes to analyzing your mental health and getting support from it. So that was very important, knowing how can we support young people not only in their personal journey, personal development, but as well acknowledging the difficulties on a social level that they have. And those maybe are out of control, but still important to map them, even using the tool that we had, the power wheel. And the second highlight as well, the approach, is this interprofessional thing happening, that acknowledging the importance of different specialists working together for the mental health. So having, of course, trained psychologists, psychiatrists, but capitalizing as well on youth workers or even on volunteers or people that maybe don't have a specific paper stating that they can work in mental health, but for sure they are very important. And here we had discussed this term expert by experience. So a person that went through the difficult mental health journey, but learning through it now can support the others. So those are the 2 key points that I noted from many others. And then when it comes to the communication, here, the first thing that I was very happy to listen to, that we should or we could try to be on the platforms that you are on the platforms. And we even try to make a TikTok energizer to try to relate and to find out what is TikTok and that everyone can actually use it. So without judgment, trying to figure it out, what are the platforms that youth uses? And even if you don't like it, at least try or ask or be there just for noticing, because just dismissing it, saying that it's silly, stupid, or and not possible to use or too difficult, I think it brings our 2 words much more separate. And as well, another point about those 2 words, it's about building the common aim and vision. So not treating that youth is there, it's them, and we are here, and we didn't have resources back in the day, and now you have everything. It's a very top-down approach, and we were really using a lot of space to just acknowledge that we all could be together in things. Of course, acknowledging big differences we have between each other, but without generalizing the things, trying to really get to know each other, and especially in the spaces when you are visible with youth, just building the common visions, even that maybe there's some misunderstanding, but at least trying out. So those are the two things. And for sure, many more I was noting, and I will share with you with the report that Pauline for sure will gather in a nice way later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga. And yes, Pauline is gathering all the reports from the facilitators, and then in the last day she will also make a speech and summing up everything that happened. So we pass now to the next facilitator, Marcus.
Hello from Vienna. This is the report from the Venus jury, and Sergio, Mark, Tuna, you're doing a great show. But a bit about the harvesting from today. So observing overall the groups and what kind of people we have here, it's very nice to see that many people express that it's good to feel the connection, to connect with like-minded people, also to get out a bit of the lockdown that we're facing in most countries, and simply feel this connection and like-mindedness and resonance, we could say. The people come from the usual suspect background, so to say. We have Erasmus and youth work, inclusion work, psychology, but also very interesting backgrounds that add additional perspectives. For instance, people working in correctional facilities, people designing and working with video games and analyzing the connection to mental health. In the first round with Stephen, we discussed a lot about big picture things, the general approach, what is the role of context, what is the role of youth work, what is not the role of youth work between all these actors and the issue of mental health. Some very interesting thoughts about the approach. For instance, that even if you feel the urge to help a person, as a youth worker, ask yourself first, can you help the person? Are you competent to help the person? Or is this maybe something for another type of specialist? So rule in youth work, at least don't cause any harm. If you cannot help, at least don't make it worse. So check your own competence and who's in charge of what. We also reflected on the importance of language, what terminology we use. So that it's different if we talk about distress and well-being or if we talk about mental health. And we talked about how certain terms became inflationary. So people say, oh my God, I don't have cornflakes for my breakfast, I'm getting a depression. So to make a bit of a clearance so that words don't become inflationary and make a difference between daily life struggles and mental health issues. It was stated also that often young people do not feel safe, do not feel confident to address these issues, do not feel safe to address it to a school counselor out of fear of stigmatization or that it gets out, that the word gets out. So we talked a lot about how to create safe spaces and shared nice practices. For example, to how to give young people ownership over the room where these kind of talks and support will take place, how to establish trust and rapport. And we will put these practices in the more detailed report to Pauline, of course. And the second and last round about resonance, we underlined the importance of listening, so that resonance is also being connected also via listening and empathy, and how to find the middle grounds for this. We mentioned that if there should be resonance between the different sectors, such as schools, youth clubs, youth work, etc., it's also important to make sure different arenas for young people are not so fragmented. Where can young people turn to work on mental health? So to make a coherent package of people working on mental health so that it's not fragmented. Because we agree that basically young people have a need for resonance. And last, a short practice to share. One example that was shared was a youth exchange on fashion. People express individuality through fashion and also the resonance, the connection with other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Really nice to see all the outcomes that are coming out. And now, next person to be sharing a little bit what happened in the groups, it's Marinella.
Yeah, so general conclusion from the both groups, of 3 groups actually we had, is so many great topics, practices, even challenges. so little time. But it's what we can do. This is how we do. And we got amazing conclusions from it. From the first group, we got very intrigued to talk about differentiations and overlapping between mental health and well-being, because some of us, we didn't actually think it as separate things. But then during the conversations, the group concluded that one can't go without the other, and they inevitably influence each other. It came out that we can't separate medical, biological factors from environmental influences of society, and that we should work more on raising that awareness in society itself. Then we realized how whenever we are talking about mental health, we were really actually meaning mostly mental unhealth or illnesses and challenges. We also tackled the topic of community being key part of the inclusion and decreasing the discrimination and stigma of young people. And youth and social workers might have a role into building that bridges between community and young people through different methods and activities. Similar like Marcus, we were also, Marcus's group, we were also thinking that you, as whatever you are working and whoever you are, act up to your abilities that you have as someone who works with young people, and rely on different other structures to help as well. With the other group, talking about resonance, we realized that there's so many different examples from different countries. For example, Finnish example, as mostly Finnish example is always the good one. They have a youth worker in every school specializing to work with young people on the topics which are different than curricula covered in the official school, which is for us, the rest of us, very amazing. And so we kind of try to figure out how this practice work. Then we thought about the many challenges of this cooperation between school and youth work, because sometimes some of the countries had, or youth workers had the experience, when they bring their workshops to the schools, it's very limiting, it's very not in the, let's say, style of the non-formal education that we work, so they don't have trust, the teachers don't have trust towards the methods that we use and so on. So we were thinking, what would be a good solution? So we have the two-way approach to it. Either you go to school and do a workshop and just try to be in their community, or you ask teachers to come to your youth club and try to participate together with young people into activities, and maybe even also add parents to it. So we try to figure out two different ways to solve this issue. And that's from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marinella. Very concise. And I will remind also everybody that you can still comment on the chat. So if you want to complement what the facilitators are presenting, please use the chat. Or if you want to share also more good practices or any resources or links, please do it. The chat is still open and will stay for a while. Now I pass to the other facilitators, Nezana.
Oh, yes. So I want to show you my mind map, and I have plenty of other documents around. I keep showing post-its and markers and so on. So there was a lot of wonderful things there. So I try to be very brief. This was so exciting to be part of this today. So the first thing that we started was, it was after Stephen's presentation, was about the complexity. So everyone acknowledged the complexity of the topic that we are talking about, and really to understand also why just the clinical approach doesn't work, because it's trying to reduce it to one issue. And in this complexity is also the role of youth work, that it's find its place to kind of to complement all the other roles that are there. So like I think previous groups, we spend a lot of time talking about, but okay, what is the role of youth work then in this? And actually we have a really great kind of title for them, which is the mental first aiders. So like you have first aid for other things, and there is also mental first aiders. It sounds great. It's also a serious issue. It's because youth workers are the ones that are in constant contact with young people, and they are the ones that might be able to recognize even the smallest of the symptoms and the actually things that are going on. So that's actually quite an important role, and they are the ones that have the relationships, whereas other roles might, again, reduce the things to an issue that is going on. The youth workers come also with the knowledge of the relationship. In all this, of course, comes the self-care, and youth workers need to be able to care about themselves before or during the time that they take care of the others. And then we also have an example of looking at the power wheel, what happens when the physical environment affects both the youth worker and the young people, like Corona lockdown affected everyone. Yeah. So what happens then when you can actually not be exempt from what is going on? So that's something to still reflect on. And with self-care come the boundaries. And I think previous groups mentioned this, and the knowing when to say, this is not in my competences, so I pass it on to other professions that might be more capable of dealing with this. And then we also talked about territories, or a territory, and whether there are really separate territories for different roles, or is it one same territory that we need to learn how to share and connect, which is actually a good connection to the second topic of the resonance and connection. And here we talked, and actually one thing that was really highlighted is the importance of peer-to-peer connection. And from examples that we shared, this was something that actually worked in most of the examples that were shared, is this peer-to-peer connection that then enables other connections also to take place. One role that was recognized also and not mentioned so much so far is the role of parents in creating and supporting the resonance and connection with the others. And whether, for example, parents recognize the role of youth work, or they are the ones that are actively telling young people, no, don't do that, that's silly. Yeah. And one last thing, in Corona times and in our Zoom conference, but also outside, is the importance of the social media and also young people's presence online, and how much it contributes to well-being and how much it's not, and connections and so on. And actually, it was said that it can also contribute to connections, but it also needs to be managed really well. But it's also helpful when young people are not on social media to try to connect, to provide environments that don't require superhumans, yeah, because social media often asks us to be super and great and the best and the prettiest, like my profile picture on Facebook. But actually, it's important to have the reality where young people don't have to be the best versions of themselves, but can embrace failures and so on. Whew. And that was not so brief, but I think that's the summary there.
Thank you so much, Snezana. Yeah, I imagine that there's a lot more to talk and to share with, but we're going to also have a resume report, and then Pauline also in the last day will also sum up everything. So I pass now to Joe.
Thank you, Sergio. I want to thank all the people that are helping today writing my book. I started 5 chapters, and I've given them a short title to remind you of the content. The first title, the chapter is Over-Sexualization. And in that chapter, it's about social media, and that there is maybe a need for media and communication literacy, but also about how adults have their own judgmental opinion of how to use it and what is correct, which is not always the same the way young people use it. The fact also that we have to start looking online where young people are nowadays, and it's also a new dimension. And if they let us in, we also touched that influencers could be the new parents for the moment, and taking over a kind of parents advisor role. The perfection, we also talked about that, could be linked to anxiety. It all has to be very beautiful, and that pushes. That's the chapter of over-sexualization. The second one is about anonymous alcoholics, and that's a very short one. It is recognizing that struggle is a first good step. That was also mentioned by few. The third chapter is the old new. And it's important to realize that isolation, social distancing, effects of quarantine are not at all new for some groups. And then we speak about people with different abilities. They've always lived that. And so maybe this is an interesting exercise in empathy as such for all of us. And that could be highlighted too. The fourth chapter, and links a bit to what Snes was saying, is called The Box of Pandora, and it's that it might be interesting to focus more on well-being sometimes instead of mental health, and that we are very aware of our competences and capacities and limitations as a youth worker or an educator, that we also aware till where do we go on these things. And the last chapter is The Forgotten Headache, and I hope we have time the following days also, because it didn't get enough space today. It's to question the system we live in. Are we wanting to cure what is the result of the system, or do we want to go to the origin of the system and maybe change the system, and then we don't need, let's say, a cure as such. So maybe we are distracting our focus sometimes a bit on that. That's the first 5 chapters, and tomorrow we'll add some more. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Joe. Very interesting points. All the facilitators are collecting very nice impressions. I will pass now to Anna Rita.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you all for this learning experiments by sharing and talking about these different topics of today. And I'm completely amazed with all the learning that I get myself. So thank you. About the first group in the morning, we had a need to go deeper on the power wheel of Stephen. And by luck, I think we had Stephen in our group, so it was quite easy to do it. But we also share kind of other methodologies that I will also put some links in my report, and I think we will be able to get it by the end of these 3 days. We also share some concerns about this power wheel and how youth work might be using this or not, and how are we capable or the right experts to use it, and talking about more the risks of using it or using other methods. We also share some concerns difference between boys and girls about the wording. Are we able to talk about emotions, for example, at the same level? Also about the stigma. If we are a youth worker in the middle of the field where we don't have other stakeholders to support our team, how can we be creative and look to support on our own community? From this afternoon, after the Magnus speech on communication, yes, we kind of understand that we have a long way to go to understand young people and this whole new world, but also to find a common ground and a common way to support each other by learning by the old us, to learn this new technology, but also what is the right track to go. We also talk about the perception of the reality, and I mean dangers, competition, comparison on this online media. And we call it the perception of reality because it doesn't mean that it's to be real, that because I have, more likes, that I'm more popular or I'm more a good person, and linking this also with a confidence and self-esteem. Yeah, and I think these are my key, my bullet points for this. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Rita. And last but not least, my dear friend and colleague, Mark Taylor.
I am his dear friend and colleague. I bet you're all jealous.
I am.
Yeah, you should be. You should be. Should be. So it's great to be the last one, because now I can go on forever and ever and ever because my colleagues were so short. So to start off, I want to mention the fact that even in the first group where we were just talking about our names and thinking about mental health and why we were at the seminar, one of people talked about the Jam board that everybody filled in, and mentioned a really a concept which really struck her, and I think it resonated in our group also, was that the idea that mental health is not a destination, it's a process. And I think all through the rest of the day I've been coming back to that. Then in second group, very important point, again, this difference between, well, what are we going through a paradigm shift? I love this word, paradigm shift. When we stop talking about mental health and start talking about well-being. I mean, I understand, and many of us would understand that, yes, you have to bring in the whole surroundings of the person and not just look internally what is going on there, but what do we gain and what do we lose if we really kick mental health as a concept and as a concentration, if we kick that out? So it's a nice question, I think. Otherwise, we are talking here, as Marcus said, from many, many, many different standpoints, many different educational backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and we have to be very careful that we notice the fact that we understand concepts very differently. So there are intercultural differences. We mentioned one which was around the whole thing about time. If you're talking about this whole fast and slow identification, what's fast for you might actually be still very, very slow for me. And we're all also working in very, very different systems. So there's like interstructural differences between. So if you're working in Finland, for example, you have 96,000 choices of different professionals that you can refer your problem child to. But if you're in Moldova, you have a whole series of hypothetical psychologists who don't even exist. So we really need to take some time sometimes to think about under what circumstances are we all operating, so that's also important. Pauline herself talked about the bullshit detector that most young people have inside of them, and which will sound very, very loud if you try to come over as being the all-caring, all-loving, all-sharing youth worker. So be authentic and, yes, make use of your surroundings in order to be able to create a resonance. And the last note we finished on in the group was, of course, the importance of music for creating some mental health, well-being, dare I say even harmony and discord, which is also very important. Have a lovely evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. And since all the facilitators are already present, I would ask Pauline if she wants just to share a little bit her opinion, because she was jumping from room to room and she needs to sum up everything. So Pauline, I will give you 2 minutes to just express a little bit, and then we're going to start closing.
Thank you. I think my first impression of today is, considering we've got 100 people from I don't know how many different countries, with all of our different national realities and our life realities and dealing with COVID-19 and Zoom, how amazing has it been today that we've got to this stage? Round of applause for everybody. Well done. Yay. So that's my first impression, is fucking hell, we did it. Excuse my language. My second impression, being a butterfly, is that Zoom is an artificial construct, and we're having to be really polite with each other when we talk. And I've noticed going around to room that sometimes people are awkward in their silence. Don't be afraid of the silence. From the silence comes the magic and the peace that we want to share with each other. So the silences have impressed me as much as our talking to each other. Facilitators, you're doing a brilliant job. The other thing I'd like to say, 35 nationalities. Wow, 35 nationalities, great. The other thing I'd like to say is that this conversation between mental health and well-being, I think, will continue over the next couple of days. To be precise in terms of what we're actually talking about, what does this mean in reality to you and your practice, I think we can explore and share further. And for sure, that youth workers and others that work with young people aren't necessarily in there for the money, because you're not going to get rich doing this job. But there's something, there's something of ourselves that we're sharing, and usually it's those people who share something of themselves that create the relationships that can resonate and can be authentic. So that's coming out really clearly too. That's probably less than 2 minutes, Sergio. Is that okay?
Perfect timing. Thank you so much, Pauline, and thank you all the facilitators and all the team. We're going to close now. I'm going to pass the word to Theodore, and just to remind you that after that we have an informal time where you can just stay here and hang around and talk with each other. And I think Mark Taylor actually wants also to facilitate a little exercise about mindfulness to start this informal time. So now I pass the word to Theodore to close this amazing day that passed so fast.